Supporting without strengthening the eating disorder, a presentation by Nourish to Flourish. This presentation is really about helping you understand something many of us do, often without even realizing it, and that's accommodation. We will explore how that can sometimes keep the eating disorder going, even when it comes from a place of love. And most importantly, we will look at simple, practical ways to respond differently in a way that supports recovery. This isn't about getting it perfect. It's about understanding what helps and building confidence to try. Before we begin, I just want to say you're not alone in this. There's no perfect way to support someone with an eating disorder. And if you're here, it means you care and you're trying. And that's what matters the most. I want to start with a moment many of us know. You're sitting at the table, your child is distressed, maybe tears, anger, or shut down, and everything in you just wants to make it stop. So you make some adjustments. You let them leave. You change the meal. You answer their questions about the calories. And in that moment, there is relief. But later you might wonder, did that help or make it harder for next time? Accommodation is when we change things, step in, or adjust situations to reduce distress. And it's important to say, this is not a bad thing in itself. It's a very human response. When we see someone we love struggling, our instinct is to help, to protect, and to ease that distress. But the key thing is to understand that accommodation helps in the moment, but it can keep the fear going in the long run. And that's when things start to become tricky. Accommodation comes from a place of love. It comes from wanting to protect, wanting to reduce distress, wanting to get through the moment. And when things are escalating, when the emotions are high, we often go into fix-it mode quickly because the moment feels urgent. And again, that doesn't make us bad carers, it makes us human. This can look different in every family, but some common examples include letting your child leave the table early because they're feeling too overwhelmed, providing calorie or ingredient information because it feels like it's the quickest way to get them to eat, or avoiding introducing new foods because you know it might lead to distress or conflict. And when we say them out loud, they make complete sense. They often work in that moment. But over time, something starts to happen. One small adjustment becomes 2, then 3, and then the eating disorder starts to learn, this works. If I push hard enough, things will change. And gradually, more accommodation is needed. The distress grows, the situation becomes more controlled by the eating disorder. This is what we call the snowball effect. And it doesn't happen overnight, it builds slowly. Over time, the impact becomes clearer. The eating disorder gets stronger. Your loved one has fewer opportunities to build coping skills. And life can start to feel smaller, more limited, more controlled. And now here's the important part. This is not because anyone has done something wrong. It's simply how the cycle works. I just want to pause here for a moment and say, in the beginning of our journey, I made these accommodations, and you might be making them as well. And I want you to know you're not failing. You are responding in the best way you can in really hard moments. And this is not about blame, it's about awareness. Because once we begin to understand what's happening, we can start to make small, meaningful shifts. And those small shifts matter so much more than getting it perfect. This is where boundaries come in, and sometimes the word boundaries can feel really harsh. But we're not talking about rigid or controlling boundaries. We're talking about firm and loving boundaries. Boundaries that are calm, consistent, and supportive. And most importantly, boundaries that support recovery, not the eating disorder. It can really help to understand the difference between these two types of boundaries. Because when we're in the middle of it, it can feel confusing and sometimes even feel like we're being too harsh. Healthy boundaries, the ones we're trying to set as carers, are different. They're flexible, supportive, and they keep connection intact. They come from a place of care, safety, and wanting to support recovery. Even though they feel firm, they are still grounded in relationship. Whereas eating disorder boundaries, on the other hand, look very different. They tend to be rigid, fear-based, and they often push people away. They're not about safety, they're about control. They create distance, limit flexibility, and keep your loved one stuck. So when you're holding a boundary, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when your loved one is upset, even when everything in you wants to make it easier in that moment, you are actually doing something really important. Eating disorders can bring a lot of chaos into everyday life. Things can feel unpredictable, emotional, and overwhelming, especially in the moment. And when we're in those moments, it's very easy to react based on emotion, stress, or urgency. That's where having a plan becomes really important. A plan helps you move from reacting to responding with intention. When we talk about a plan, we're not talking about something rigid or perfect. We're talking about something simple, clear, that you can come back to when things feel hard. Your plan might include what you will and won't accept. For example, staying at the table during meal times. How you will respond, like using calm, consistent language. And what consequences will look like. Making sure they are realistic and something you can follow through with. Because consistency is what builds safety, not perfection, consistency. Another important part of the plan is that it takes the pressure off in the moment. You're not trying to figure out what to do while everything feels heightened. You've already thought it through. So instead of reacting emotionally, you can come back to your plan and respond in a clear, steady way. And that calm, steady response is what helps reduce the eating disorder's control over time. One of the most powerful parts of a plan is being on the same page as other carers. When responses are different or inconsistent, the eating disorder can start to look for gaps. It might push one parent, then the other, testing where the boundary might shift. This is not your child being manipulative. That's the eating disorder trying to stay in control. But when carers are aligned, even if it's not perfect, it creates clarity and safety. There's less confusion, less opportunity for the eating disorder to take hold, and your loved one begins to experience something really important: consistency, predictability, and safety. In those really hard moments when emotions are high, voices might be raised, or everything feels like it's escalating, it can help to come back to something steady and simple. Because in those moments, thinking clearly is hard for your loved one and for you. So instead of trying to find the perfect words, we simplify it down to these 3 steps: acknowledge, reassure, and hold the boundary. We start by acknowledging what they're feeling. I can see this is really hard. This helps your loved one feel seen and understood. It can lower defensiveness because they feel like you get it. Then we move to reassurance. So it could be something like, I'm here with you. You're not on your own. We'll get through this together. This is about connection. You're showing them that you're not stepping away even when things feel intense. And then comes the hard part, holding the boundary. So you might say, and we're still going to continue. We're going to keep going with the plan. You're not removing the expectation. You're not changing the boundary. You're holding it calmly, gently, and consistently. What you're doing here is really important. You're validating the emotion, maintaining connection, and not reinforcing the eating disorder. You're saying, I see how hard this is, and I still believe you can get through it. And it's important to remember, it's not about getting the perfect words. It's about your tone, a calm voice, a slow pace, repeating the message. Because when things escalate, consistency is more powerful than complexity. And it's also important to be honest here that it might not work straight away. Your loved one might still be upset, they might push back, and they might continue to test the boundaries. That doesn't mean it's not working. It means you're doing something different. And over time, this is what helps build trust, safety, and stronger coping. You're not trying to remove the hard moment. You're helping them to learn that they can get through it. I'd like you to take a moment to reflect. This isn't about getting it right. It's just about noticing. Think about a recent situation that had felt really hard. Maybe it was a mealtime. Maybe it was a moment of distress or resistance or overwhelm. Just bring that moment to mind. Now gently ask yourself, how did I respond in that moment? I don't want you to judge it. I just want you to notice it. Was there any accommodation? Did anything change to reduce the distress in that moment? And then the most important question, what might a small shift look like next time? Not a big change, not a perfect response, just something small and manageable. It might be staying at the table just a little longer, using one calm sentence before reacting, holding a boundary for a few extra moments. Because change doesn't come from doing everything differently. It comes from small shifts repeated over time. This is hard. I've been in your shoes and I know what it feels like to sit in those moments, to question yourself, to wonder if you're doing the right thing. There's no perfect way to do this, but I wish there was. There will be days when they don't go to plan. There will be moments that feel messy and overwhelming and exhausting. But what matters is not perfection. What matters is this. You keep showing up, you staying as consistent as you can, and you trying again even after the hard moments. Because it's those small, steady steps, repeated over time, that create change. Not big, perfect moments, but the quiet, consistent ones.